Hi, everybody. Welcome to another version of the Bruce Singer podcast. I'm Bruce Singer. I'm the host of the Bruce Singer podcast, and I'm also CEO of Canada CFOs, which provides on contract CFOs, part-time CFOs, and fractional CFOs. And we're very passionate about the food industry, health and wellness. And I'm thrilled to have a guest on today, Richard Rabkin. I'll describe Richard. Richard is the managing director of Kosher Council of Canada. He's also a lawyer, 7 years a lawyer, an MBA, and interesting individual. He's also a rabbi by trade. So this is a first for me, by the way, rabbi, lawyer, and an entrepreneur in a way.
Yes.
Pardon?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you, Bruce. It's usually a first for many people as well. I guess there's not a lot of people that have all those three things.
It's amazing. And actually, in his career, he worked in the entertainment division. He worked in legal at CTV before he was at Kashruth Council. And today we're going to talk about kosher food, a lot of good stuff. And it's going to be very insightful for sure. So, Richard, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's great having you.
Thanks for having me on, Bruce. I'm really excited.
Okay. So first we're going to talk about explain what the Kashruth Council of Canada actually is and what it actually does in its mission. I'd like to know what you guys do.
Yeah. Sure. So we are a not-for-profit organization that certifies food as kosher. Okay. We certify about 1,000 facilities, both in Canada and abroad. And you may recognize our core symbol, which the letters COR in an oval, which you would see on food products in grocery stores, both Canada and abroad. And we also, so that's our industrial certification. By industrial, we mean our factories that produce food. And then we also certify local food service establishments, restaurants, caterers, retirement homes, things like that in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto area.
Yeah, because I've seen the sign. Like I look at foods and I see restaurants. I see them everywhere. I see this. Is your organization limited? It's Canada only, or do you certify outside of Canada, like internationally as well?
Right. So the majority is in Canada. But just like I'm sure there's lots of producers out there who sell their Canadian products globally, Canada has a great reputation for quality and politeness and friendliness. So so too we certify companies around the world as well. Perhaps they want a little bit of our Canadian friendliness as well.
Very cool. So what is kosher food? And what is a kosher restaurant, kosher facility? What exactly, you're certifying something to be something.
Right.
What exactly is the goal here? Yeah.
Right. So the word kosher really comes from Hebrew. It's an ancient word. And in our context here, it means fit for consumption. Okay, right. So something that's kosher, you could eat it, and something that's not kosher, somebody who keeps kosher wouldn't eat it, right? And we even use that in the lexicon, right? If you say, hey, that's not kosher, or even you're doing something on your taxes, that's not kosher, right? Like, so we kind of get this idea, right? Not you, Bruce. Not you.
No, I've done it.
No. You've never done something non-kosher in your taxes. Don't admit that right now on the Bruce Singer show. But right, so we have things that are kosher and non-kosher. Now, the Bible, or as we call it, the Torah in Hebrew, outlines a number of animals that are non-kosher and kosher, and a number of rules as well. But really, over thousands of years, there's a lot more details, and those details are in other Jewish works. So, for example, what might be most relevant to consumers today is that things, let's say, like probably most people know that pork is not kosher, right? Most people know that. It's also not in conformity with the halal diet as well. So we have a lot of halal consumers that rely on kosher. So pork is not kosher. And animals, let's say a cow needs to be slaughtered in a very, very specific regimented way. So again, what does that mean in stores? If you're shopping for groceries, something like gelatin most likely is not going to be kosher. And that's just one example, but there are a whole lot of rules that revolve around kosher. And that is kind of what we do. We have a number of rabbis on staff. We have about 100 people across the country who work for us, some full-time, some part-time. And we, basically are making sure that all of those rules that are prescribed and that have been kept for thousands of years for kosher consumers are the ones that are being implemented in the facility when you see a core certification on a package.
Okay. So you mentioned something about the animal, how it's slaughtered. Let's look at common beef. Common, right? And chicken, I assume, same thing. Both would be just ones that I'm most familiar with. So it's slaughtered differently, but what is there actual health? Is it a religious benefit, or is there actual health benefit to it? Like what from a layman's point of view? Like,
right. So ultimately, a believing kosher consumer such as myself does it because the Bible says to do it, God says to do it, and we do it. Right. That's ultimately the answer. But you're asking, is there anything healthier or safer about it? There certainly is a perception that it is, and I guess that is one. Right. That's an important reason why companies seek certification. I was in the doctor's office recently, and the nurse who was taking my blood asked me what I did, and I told her, the Kosher Council, and she says, "Oh yeah, I only buy kosher chicken when I'm at Costco because it's better, it's safer, it's healthier, or what have you." Right?
There is that perception, yeah.
Right. So I think I mean I don't recall seeing many recalls, for example, of kosher meat. You do see a lot of recalls of non-kosher, or at least you read about it or hear about it. I have not. I don't recall ever reading or hearing about one. So anecdotally, is it healthier, safer? Maybe. There's certainly a lot more care that goes into the slaughter process. It's smaller quantities. And so, I think that there is certainly a perception out there that there is something healthier or safer about kosher.
Okay, and also it applies to meat. Could apply to dairy products. Could apply to jams, food. It could apply to everything, right across the board. Maple syrup. I've seen it on the maple syrup, logo.
Okay, so good.
Yeah.
So let's take maple syrup for one just small example. So why would something like maple syrup comes from trees? Why would it need a kosher certification?
Good question.
Good question. Okay, fine.
Actually, why does anything need a kosher certification?
Right.
I can answer that broadly.
Bruce, I'm stealing your job. I'm asking all the questions.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So the way that some places make maple syrup, maple syrup is something that's done on a kind of craft, localized basis. Oftentimes, let's say a farm will have trees, and they tap the trees, and out comes maple. And so you might have them doing, 100 trees. Sometimes if you're driving in the country roads, you'll see people saying, "Hey, stop, and you can buy some maple syrup," or something like that. So it's kind of a little bit of a craft product. Now, when you go through the process of making the maple syrup, they usually use something called a defoamer. A defoamer is to kind of, keep it from foam and bubbling and what have you, because they have to heat it. And oftentimes what they did is they used a defoamer that was had a lard base to it, and lard, as we know, is pig fat.
Yes.
So we need to make sure that the defoamer is a kosher variety, and so that is usually why something like maple syrup will require kosher certification.
Interesting. So if I see your certification, it's for sure doesn't have lard. So there's a probability that the maple syrup doesn't have the certification would have lard in it, or other. Well, it depends, But
I don't know if I would make that extrapolation,
yeah.
because sometimes sometimes a manufacturer just isn't interested. Sometimes it's complicated. We had one application from maple syrup manufacturer who sourced the base maple syrup from a number of different farms. And so it was difficult for us to say, we were saying, okay, well, let's say he's sourcing from 100 different farms. So were we going to go audit 100 different farms to make sure they were using the right defoamer? Like, it just got a little bit too complicated. So sometimes there are other reasons why a product might not have kosher certification.
Interesting. So what are the other reasons? What are the core reasons for kosher certification? What are the core reasons, like right across the board? Why does someone call it? Like I have clients that do a lot of work in the health food industry, and one thing I noticed, like a lot of the natural food products, like almost all of them have kosher certification on it. Why is that? Why is that?
So ultimately the answer is because companies think that it's a wise business decision, right?
Okay.
There are a lot of people that rely on kosher certification, not just, guys who are traditional kosher consumers like me. In fact, there are studies, two studies, in fact, one done by Mintel, which is a market research firm, another by Cannondale and Associates, two market research firms, and they studied kosher consumers. Why do you consider yourself, you're buying this because this is a kosher product? Why? And only a very small percentage, I think 7 or 8%, were Jewish. Okay, so who are these other people?
Yeah.
Well, you have other religious faiths. So I mentioned halal consumers, right? They rely on kosher a fair bit because there's a lot of crossover. There are vegetarians and vegans who rely on kosher. There are people with certain allergies, let's say crustacean allergies. And there's people who feel more comfortable that it's healthier or safer because there's another set of eyes who are watching this product. So there are a lot of different groups that rely on kosher certification. And ultimately, these consumers speak, so to speak, to the owners of these labels, and they say, we would like to see this product be kosher certified if we're going to buy it. And so then the company says, hey, Kashruth Council of Canada, they say, hey, Richard Rabkin, let's talk about CTV later. Let's talk about COR now and tell us, why do we want to have kosher certification? We have a conversation about it. And they ultimately say, yeah, this is a wise business decision for us. So, so at the end of the day, this is just something that companies look at and they think, and I think rightly so, that this is a good business decision.
You're right, because ultimately the consumer drives the behavior if they want to meet consumer demand. That's otherwise, if you're not meeting consumer demand and as trends change, if you're not following the consumer trend, well, you know what happens then. It becomes a bit of a problem. Because you did a tremendous, and I was looking at your website, you did I guess you did a partnership with Loblaws. You want to talk about that? How did that?
Yeah, sure. And that's actually something that I was just going to comment, Bruce, is that, sometimes if it's the consumers that voice their support for kosher, and sometimes it's retailers. And because retailers see the data and they say, oh, hang on a second. When this product becomes kosher, automatically the sales go up. So that must mean that, kosher is good. And Loblaws was one of those retailers. All the retailers, by the way, in Canada are fantastic. Sobeys, Metro, Costco, Walmart, don't want to leave anybody out, but I'm just speaking from personal experience because you mentioned Loblaws.
Because I just have to pick up on it, the website.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So Loblaws kind of noticed this trend, and we started a discussion with them, and they, really were aggressive in their private label program, right? Their President's Choice and No Name program, and they in seeking out kosher certification for their private label products. And one of the things that they thought was it would be good to have some uniformity with the kosher certification, and it would be good to be able to interface with, one agency, us, the COR, in order to kind of be their voice for kosher, be their guide. And so that's ultimately what happened. So so we are the exclusive kosher certifier for Loblaws. And that means that if you see a Loblaws private label product, President's Choice, No Name, Blue Menu, Black Label, those types of things, you will see the core kosher symbol on it.
Congratulations. But you're right. You're right. Interesting. So interesting, how that kind of goes above, because everybody today, like I've studied trends in the food industry, and more people are looking at all the labels and where it comes from, and much more than they did 10 years ago. They want to know exactly what they're buying. And interesting. I got another question. Now, when I buy products, I see core most of the time, but I see there's a U. I see other kosher. And someone I've even searched someone said it's kosher, but even not a label. Well, that I don't touch because it just wrote it's kosher. What's the difference? Like what's going on? Yeah.
Right. So there are a bunch of different kosher certifiers out there.
Yeah.
A lot of them are geographic in nature and sprang up geographically originally. So the Orthodox Union that you mentioned is based out of New York. And so they're a large kosher certifier, and they certify some products in Canada, but also products around the world. And our mandate, I guess Kosher Council of Canada, so we're quite active across Canada, but as we talked about at the beginning, globally as well.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of certifiers. If you're in Lithuania, there's probably Lithuania kosher, or Poland, there's probably Poland kosher. So there's lots of kosher certifiers around the world that represent their geographic areas. Now, there is an umbrella group called AKO, the Association of Kosher Organizations, and we kind of meet and set minimum standards. And so most of the large kosher certifiers are a part of this organization. There are some that aren't. So there's some times where a kosher consumer, for example, might say, oh, I don't really recognize this kosher Namibia. What's this all about? No offense to kosher Namibia if it exists, but I'm just trying to pick an example, So there is a situation where some kosher certifications are less recognized than others, like our kosher Namibia example.
Yeah.
So I think a retailer and a manufacturer wants to choose one that is well recognized by consumers and is accepted. But aside from that, the major certifiers are and we work together and we're friends and we have conferences where we share best practices. So it's actually a very nice thing to see when, I would assume that in other industries, the leaders of, I don't know, let's say Rogers and Bell and TELUS don't sit together and say, hey, how can we make this industry better? They might, I don't know. But that's indeed what happens with the kosher industry, that, that we do sit together and we're friends and we just try to raise the standards in the industry.
That's wonderful. One other question too I had, this just came up. I was at a dinner a few weeks ago. So there was a talk, well, if it's organic, it's kosher. I don't think that's the case.
That is not the case.
So if you're organic, you have to get certified for kosher. Is that right? You have to be certified kosher.
Have to be certified kosher, and also organic. Yeah. Organic is its own, certification, and I think it's not related really.
Yeah, but if you want to be certified kosher, you got to be certified kosher, whether you're organic or not.
That's right.
That's the okay.
There's some, there's some crossovers between the certifications, and I think it's certainly helpful for us from our perspective when a company is certified by, let's say it has a food safety certification, BRC or SQF or something like that. So now that means the company knows this is how we organize our ingredients, how we organize our manufacturing. So it definitely helps, and there's some crossover, but kosher stands on its own, as do I think most of the certifications. Is
there when you talk to restaurants, when you're kosher, because then you have the in Toronto, there's an organization that certifies it health-wise. I don't know what it's called. I don't off the top of my head. But does kosher go through the entire? Is there a difference from the restaurant level, like in terms of like kosher food? Is it also meat cleanliness? Does it cover a bunch of things like when a restaurant's done?
Well, kosher certification in a restaurant setting is very different than it is in a factory. Right? In a factory, you're kind of banging out, let's say, the same widget over and over again, and there's processes in place, and so it's controlled, right? Okay. And so our rabbis, our kosher inspectors, don't have to be there the whole day at, let's say, Kellogg's, because we know how they're making the cornflakes. Yeah. But a restaurant is really different, right? And you run out of I don't know, mayonnaise, you got to get more, or it's very fluid. So in those situations, the kosher inspectors are present a lot more frequently. Okay. Most of the time, there's actually somebody who's there on staff who works there, whose job it is to be the kosher inspector, but also works for the business. So it's a lot more dynamic in the food service area. Wow. But to answer the second part of your question, we kind of learned over the years that our expertise is in kosher, and we stick to that for the most part. Toronto Public Health or whatever the regulatory body is in any particular city will handle. That's their expertise. Is the CFIA in Canada, let's say, will look after things of food safety, but we stick to what we know best, which is kosher.
Okay, thank you. That's good. That's good to clarify. Thank you. Now, so what do you see? What do you see the trends like? What's the future hold? Where's this going? What do you see the trends look like for food, kosher food? Where do you see things going for your organization, and just food in general?
Right. So, in general, kosher is an ancient tradition, right? It's been around for 3,000 years, but it is modern in its application, right? So that means that wherever the industry goes, we will go with it, right? So we have, let's say, for example, we've modernized so that it used to be that you need to make sure that every single ingredient that you have in your product is kosher, right? So they would either send a fax to the office, right? Here are the ingredients, and maybe here's the kosher certificates. But that's not the way we do it anymore, right? We have a sophisticated computer database, an online portal where companies, submit the ingredients and products, and we don't have to go to the factory the next day saying, okay, let me see everything. We can see it in the database. These are the ingredients, these are the products. And the next time we visit the factory, then we can verify that what happened in the computer is happening in real time. So I would say that we're adapting technology. We're using it to the best of our ability. But I wouldn't say that we're going to have robots being being kosher certifiers. I don't think we're going to have any Rabbi robots or anything like that. I did go to a factory and I looked around and I said to the plant manager, it was quite a large factory. I said, "Where are all your employees?" And he said, "They're all robots. These robots are these are the best employees because they don't ask for sick time, they don't take vacations, they don't want to unionize these robots." Yeah. And they're the best. So we certainly have seen increased automation in plants, and I think that will continue. But basically, wherever the industry is going, I think kosher is going to go along with it.
Interesting. You said so. If you have a plant that makes, I don't know, chicken, some of the chicken, it's not only the chicken they use; it's also the ingredients, the spices. It's all of it, and, right. The conveyor belts. It's the whole. It's entire. Does it also packaging? Does it apply to packaging too?
That's a good question, and for the most part, patching is not an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're right. Every ingredient, every sub ingredient, and sometimes that can be complicated because you could have, let's say, a flavor that has, I don't know, 100 sub ingredients. So it can be complicated, but for the most part, something's going to have a kosher certificate. And you see, if you go into the supermarket, about half of the products that are on shelves of supermarkets are kosher certified.
They are kosher. Yeah. And you see more and more. Like I said before, I saw it in the natural food shops. It's like almost like the norm now. I'm surprised when I don't see it.
Right.
It's become the norm. And there's all changes going on in packaging too. They become biodegradable, packaging made with food. I don't know, who knows how this thing's going to play out. But good, congratulations on everything you've accomplished. And this was very, I'm Jewish and I learned something.
Okay, good.
I learned something. This was very, very insightful. Very insightful.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Bruce, for having me on podcast and for all the great work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you. Is there anything else that you want to share that I didn't ask that you thought was important for the listeners that you thought might be important?
I just want to wish my kids happy going back to school. I know they're really excited about that. And to all the kids out there that are going back to school, hopefully this is a great, wonderful, normal year.
Hope so, yeah.
And thanks to you for all the great work that you do.
Thank you so much, Richard. Everybody, have a wonderful day. Thank you.